Welcome to the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by Bakar to preview an absolutely monumental Game Week 29. I'm going to come right off the bat and say that I have no idea what I'm doing with my team this week, and maybe some of you out there as well aren't sure too. So who better to talk to than Bakar to tell us what he's thinking, his initial plans for the upcoming game week. He has just told me off screen that what he's thinking of doing is pretty crazy. Controversial. That's all I've got. So I'm in the dark, but I'm interested to see what you're thinking of, Bakar. How are you? And give us a brief sort of snippet as to why you've just said what you're doing is crazy.
Yeah, hello Jack. Hello and welcome to all the listeners and viewers. Yeah, I'm coming on the back of some good weeks for green arrows. Courtesy João Pedro, Colwell stepping up. So it doesn't really feel as if I'm in a position where I need to do anything crazy, but I think I will. And I'll get to the point straight away. I will be selling Mo Salah this week, and that's going to be to buy Haaland. I have three free transfers for clarity, and I have 2.4 million in the bank. And I think I will be using at least two of my transfers to facilitate that move. It is a transfer that I have, briefly, quietly planned over the previous few weeks. I wasn't really sure whether I'd have the balls to go ahead with it, but it seems as if the more I think about it, I will very likely do it. And I completely understand. I can already sort of foresee the comments that people will say, Salah's the GOAT. He is, the top scoring FPL player who's smashing all records. So it seems crazy. And I can totally relate to where people will come from, but I generally feel as if there is a method to the madness, and I'll explain briefly why.
I think let's just get into that straight away then. So you're selling Salah, top scoring player in the game. Obviously, he's going to break all the records for the best FPL player we've ever seen. And you're selling him, even though he's blanking in just 1 week, and then he comes straight back and he's got Everton at home in a plum fixture. So yeah, let's just get into it. Talk to us about your thoughts and your plans, but then also for people like me who aren't sure what they're doing, is it worth selling Salah? Is it worth doing what you're doing to be able to get Haaland in for this game week?
So it depends on the number of free transfers you have, but for anyone with two, I think this is a switch which is well worth making. Um, so I'll get into it straight away. So for this week is Game Week 29. Liverpool are blanking. City are playing Brighton at home. Haaland is very likely to be the optimal captain when you look at the bookmakers' goal scoring odds. I know City have been out of form, but Haaland is rated 54% chance of scoring this week. The second best is Raul at 46%. So straight away, you're getting the optimal captain in this week. While if you are, let's say, not selling Salah, then you're probably looking for a suboptimal captain, which doesn't exactly feel all that great. Next week is one which could backfire because Salah has Everton at home, but then again, Haaland has Leicester at home, and I truly believe that the way Everton are defending this season, they're actually much better defense than Leicester. So I would still, had I owned both, I would still prefer captaining Haaland at home to Leicester as opposed to Salah at home to Everton in game week 30.
Sure.
Then when you move on to game week 31, Liverpool are playing Fulham away, but that's another week where Newcastle are playing Leicester away. And I think that's another fixture where I would marginally tilt towards captaining Isak. And in game week 31, most importantly, I think I will be wildcarding. So my team right now will very likely be vastly different to the team I will have in game week 31. Now, bear in mind, Liverpool don't have any doubles left in the rest of the season. And one of the main reasons why I feel as if it's probably worth the risk not having Salah. I mean, you know me, Jack, I'm one of the most risk averse managers out there, and I often get called out for it. So if I'm sort of feeling relatively comfy about this transfer, then there has to be something that probably suggests that it should be the case. Anyway, in 31, I'll wildcard. My team will look vastly different to what it is looking right now, and I think that's a week. In game week 1, I will very likely have 3 from Newcastle, 3 from Palace in order to attack the double in 32. And in 31, I think I will very likely go for Isak as my captain. Then in game week 32, as spoken earlier, Newcastle have a double at home to United and Palace. I will very likely use my triple captaincy chip on Salah. sorry, on Isak.
Yeah.
And then in game week 33, we're likely to have a double game week for Manchester City, depending on how the cup fixtures go. But it's something which is highly probable. In which case, my captain will again be Haaland. So from game week 29, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, that's 5 weeks. I don't see a single week where Salah would be my captain. The only sort of week where it come relatively close would be game week 31. But apart from that, I struggle and fail to justify the premium on Salah being spent, where my captains are either likely to be other double game weekers or either going to be Erling Haaland. So I know the risk that people will have in their minds, or the fear will be that they will lose, let's say, 0.5, 0.6 million value on Salah while selling him. And then they're going to be afraid that they might not be able to buy him back. But personally, if I'm committing to that transfer, I don't see a world where I buy him back at least before game week 34, if need be.
Okay.
And by game week 31, let's say if I'm wildcarding, which I presume a lot of people will, because that's going to be the week where cup info will emerge, then I presume that in game week 32, 33, they will be saving a transfer anyway.
Yeah.
So that will lead you to, let's say, 2, 3 free transfers by 34, even if you need to get Salah back. So, I mean, long story short, for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I feel as if it's totally viable to go without Salah and go for Erling Haaland. I guess the next counter question would be, why not sell Palmer instead of Salah, which is a perfectly viable question to ask given Palmer's wretched form, given his recent run of blanks. My reason there would be that firstly, Salah is a lot more expensive than Palmer. So a lot of people won't have the luxury to be making the Palmer to Haaland switch into free transfers as opposed to with Salah, which would be for free. So I think I'm going to keep Palmer. The next week's fixture against Tottenham is something which I think it will be a high scoring game. And I think then I can reevaluate it when I wildcard in game week 31 as to what to do with Palmer going forward. But straight away, when you look at Palmer, it's 2 fixtures this week and next week versus Salah's one in 30. And when I factor in the fact that I'm not taking a hit and I'm not captaining Haaland in game week, sorry, not captaining Salah in game week 30, then I feel as if the transfer that I have in my mind makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. I think I completely agree with you in terms of no, if you're not sure on captaining Salah over the next 4 or 5 weeks, then even if he's scoring loads and loads of points, then he doesn't necessarily provide the greatest value at his now inflated price. I would say as well that if you're thinking about losing that value on Salah, you've already built up 1 million in him, etc. I don't think that is a good enough reason to not sell him. I don't think that you losing 0.5 million if you were to then buy him back at that increased price is reason enough to just say, well, I think I can do better without him and get more points. Also, I think you've got to slightly back yourself to find a cheaper option elsewhere in your team if you need to. If you do think that eventually buying Salah back is worth it, I still think that's absolutely fine. As Bakar said, like, you have 2 or 3 free transfers. But I don't know. It's tough. I would counter that and say that, is he not still the best captain option in all of those weeks, because he's been the best captain option throughout the entire season? He's the safest captain, etc. Or you just think now is the time to go against him?
I would just like to add that, I think we're at this point now where it has to be one of Haaland or Salah and not just both because of Salah's inflated price, like you mentioned. Because I just believe if you go for both, then it would hamstring your team to quite a large extent. I sort of agree with you where you're saying that Salah's been the greatest player of the season, etc. He's breaking all records, but I've gone through each of those game weeks one by one, and I'm just a sucker for doublers, right? So irrespective of form, I would always back the guy with a double game week fixture.
No, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
So I just feel as if it's an opportunity there to be had, in my opinion, because I realize that not a lot of people will make the transfer. If you look at polls on Instagram, Twitter, people don't like making that transfer. So I think especially if you're chasing, it's a transfer which makes a lot of sense. And irrespective of that, I think it's something which should net you, a certain gain for the next few weeks. And it feels very similar, Jack, to, you remember when Haaland was scoring hat tricks early in the season?
Yeah.
And when we sold him for Salah, I think it was in game week 9 or 10. And if you look back at our video back then and read the comments, a lot of people will be saying similar stuff. That this transfer makes no sense. It's too risky. But eventually, then people come to peace with it. And as far as the transfer makes sense in your head, and as far as you can just come to peace with it, then it's fine. Sure, Salah will score quite a few points in the next few weeks, but if you can make that up with Haaland and the extra money that you're saving, and the hits not being taken, then I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I said at the start that I'm not sure what I'm doing. I had always planned to sell Salah this week to fund Haaland. I think I'm fine doing that. Although I do think the insurance of having that game week 31 wildcard, or knowing that you have the wildcard, is quite big, just in case something happens and you do think, actually no, I do need Salah for the rest of the season. I know he's not, if he may not double, etc., and there might be better captain options, but it's going to be hard to go without him. One thing that is interesting, which I will show now, is your AI recommended transfers according to Fantasy Football Hub, and they are to sell Salah to fund Haaland. So similar to what you're saying, according to the granular sort of data, that is what the Hub's AI recommends. As always, guys, if you would like your own recommendations for your team, click the link in the description, sign up to Fantasy Football Hub, and see what is recommended for your personal team. But yeah, the recommendation is for you to sell Salah for Haaland.
I have a couple of things to add. Firstly, if let's say City aren't to have a double in 33, then I think it would be more conceivable to have Salah on the game week 31 wildcard, because then automatically his stock would go up in the absence of Haaland's double. But we won't have that cup information till later on, so there's no point sort of speculating about it before the deadline, because we can only play with the info we have available. The second thing I'd like to have is that in my sort of case and in my team, it's actually much easier to make the transfer because I have Ollie Watkins as well, who's blanking, and he's not going to be someone who's going to play a major role for me later on in the season. So I have no problem selling Watkins. I mean, his double is gone, and I'm fine getting rid of him. But for people with Isak, I think it needs a certain degree of more consideration. I'd be a little more reluctant selling Isak as opposed to Watkins, because Isak's fixture next week is really good in game week 30.
Yeah.
And not only that, if let's say you were to decide that you are wildcarding later on in the season, not in game week 31, then you would want to hold Isak for the game week 32 double as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
In which case, selling Isak is more risky. Having said that, with the information we have right now, I would still commit to it because game week 31 is looking very, very likely for a lot of teams out there.
I also think, like, for me personally, I have as much money in Isak as I do as Salah, or it's like 0.1 difference. So depending on when you bought these players, if you care about the value as well, can be a big thing if you're choosing whether to sell Isak or Salah, for example. If you've got money in both of them, it doesn't really matter. So you might as well go Isak, as you know that he's going to be in your Game Week 31 wildcard 100%. Also, as you said, the Brentford fixture in Game Week 30 is really good. And there's a lot of time after the League Cup final for Newcastle to sort of reset and recover, that I don't think there's going to be too much of a hangover. It's 2 weeks later or whatever it is. So what are your plans then with your transfers? You said at the top of the video, how many transfers do you have?
3, with 2.4 million in the bank. So I think I'll be selling Salah. I'll very likely be getting a Bournemouth midfielder. Now I already have Dango. We'll come to Dango in a bit. So the options realistically are between Semenyo and Kluivert. I think both of them are perfectly fine. I'm actually struggling to pick between them. But at the time of recording, I think I'm likely siding with Semenyo because of his minutes. His minutes have been stronger than Kluivert. And while I feel as if Kluivert is a slightly better option when both are on the field, I want to go with Semenyo. Now, there's another elephant in the room to address. And that is that Bournemouth have this FA Cup game right before Game Week 30.
Yeah.
And Game Week 30, for the benefit of our listeners, is going to be a midweek game week. That's Bournemouth have a game, if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday. And they're playing against City in the Cup at the weekend. So Bournemouth are in a position where they can field a very strong team against City in the Cup. If you go behind actually further, then you would see that there's the chance of Semenyo getting minutes in the internationals as well, possibly Kluivert. too, and that just sort of puts me off and in having too much confidence in either's minutes in that midweek, because we've seen that Ariola he generally likes to rotate a lot. That's why I just think I would just side with Semenyo for the minutes, because he's been a complete minutes monster this season, and Cliver we've seen been subbed early, and while he's in this rich vein of form, I'm not exactly sure as to whether his minutes are stronger than Semenyo.
I've actually despised owning Semenyo this season. I'm going to be honest. I actually worked out how many points I got from him and how many points I've benched from him since owning him in game week 6. I'll try and find my exact workings out, but I've benched more points from him. I think I've benched about 50 points, and I've got 38 points from him. And I've benched him in 6 game weeks, and I played him in 11 game weeks, something like that. So my overall point there is, yeah, he's great for minutes, but he's not been doing that much recently. Is he still a better pick than Cliver, who's been doing really well?
When you look at their data over the course of the season, their underlying data is fairly similar.
Yeah, but who cares? I don't care about underlying data when I look at a player like Semenyo who misses one-on-ones, and then Cliver who bangs in goals from like 35 million yards, and he's just a better footballer, in my opinion.
This is where the difference lies. I mean, I do take underlyings into account, and if a player is overperforming over the course of the season, it doesn't exactly mean that he's a great finisher. I mean, for example, Chris Wood has been exactly that this season. He's historically not been a great finisher, and he's overperformed this season. I am almost certain that next season he won't keep this level of ridiculous form up. So it's just a case of positive variance, and I would, over the period of time, I haven't owned Semenyo at all this season. I think I probably owned him for 1 or 2 game weeks max. And in the weeks where I haven't owned him, whenever Bournemouth score and I get a notification, I'm always terrified whether it's Semenyo or not, because relatively his ownership in the engaged managers is quite high. So I think it's about time I sort of board that train and ride it out, because I just really rate him as a pick.
Okay, so I've done that transfer, which was Salah to Semenyo, which interestingly is exactly what the AI recommended for your Salah replacement as well. And then the next one is Watkins to HAALAND, you said. Now, the difference here is that Fantasy Football Hub said that you could do Ndiaye to HAALAND and keep Watkins and then play him in game week 30 and maybe beyond if you don't decide to wildcard. But I think the fact that you seem pretty set on wildcarding in 31 negates that a little bit. So yeah, just explain why you'd sell Watkins over Ndiaye, who still has that knee issue.
I was going to come to that, actually. There's a third transfer that I might make.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Right? That's the thing. And I'm not sure whether or not I'll make it. That will be firmly dependent on what I think of Dango. Now, the thing with Dango is that I don't expect him to start game week 29. I think they will very likely field a similar team, at least a similar attack this week. But because I see a very strong 11 in the game against City in the Cup, there's a chance that Dango comes back in the team in game week 30.
Yeah.
And if he's starting game week 30, do I get rid of him or do I use a transfer to bench him is what I'm trying to figure out in my head. Because the third transfer that I'm looking at is actually Ndiaye to Evan Nilsson. I could do that. But then again, I am struggling to see if Evan Nilsson plays 3 games in 6 days as well.
Yeah.
At that point. And, all of these conundrums are actually interrelated, because if there's a chance that, Dango starts, Evan Nilsson doesn't, there's a chance it's the exact opposite. And, it's further clouded by the fact that when I was looking at the FA Cup fixture, I realized that Kirkes is suspended for that game. And if Kirkes is suspended, there's a chance that Dango might play left back as well. So
he's suspended, is he? Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's tricky. It's very tricky to figure things out.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, you never know. They could go to something like a back 5 and
yeah.
I mean, I doubt it. I would think it would probably just be a straight swap for who could fill in at left back, maybe Hill, or I don't know. Is Smith even there anymore? I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, interesting. I mean, Cook's been playing at right back and he's a centre mid, so they're slightly light on fullbacks anyway. Who knows what might happen there? Who knows? Interesting stuff.
My point being that I think those 2 transfers of let's say Salah to Semenyo or Clivert, probably Semenyo, and Watkins to Haaland are fairly
Yeah.
close to being locked, I would say. But the third transfer could be anything. It could be NDI to Evanilson, it could be Dango to Clivert, or I could even roll.
This is the thing. How likely are you to actually make that third transfer? I mean, yeah, I get the first two for sure. We'll come on to potential other moves you potentially could do with those two, and maybe keeping Salah in a second. But how likely are you to make that third transfer right now?
I'm not sure. It depends on my assessment of expected minutes. Let's say if Bournemouth fans are expecting Dango to miss out again in the next
He
two
definitely
weeks,
will.
then
He definitely will. There's no way he'll start.
it de- it depends on 30, right? If he's starting in 30, then I'll
Yeah,
probably keep him. That's the thing, right? It depends on his minutes in 30, and it depends on Evan Nilsson's minutes in 30 as well, right? Because if he's not playing in 30, then is it worth buying him this week? That's the tricky part.
probably not. Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
tough.
that's the thing, right? I would love to save a transfer because I believe that saving a transfer will be critical in the weeks to come with the cup information which is to emerge later. But if Dango continues to be a problem, my hand might be forced.
Well, that game against City is 4:30 on the Sunday, and then they're playing on the second on the Wednesday in the evening. So the turnaround time is what, 3 full days until their next game, or 2 full days, whatever, Monday and Tuesday, and then the majority of Wednesday. So you think there would have to be rotation there. Also, it depends how they're looking in the league at that point, but I don't think that. I mean, it depends how the game goes. I'm not going to say what they're going to prioritize, but
Exactly. It's
it's tough,
difficult to
isn't
say,
it?
right?
Yeah. I mean, that game could go to extra time very feasibly as well. That Bournemouth City game. I mean, that's a very tough game to call at the moment. That should be a great game.
And if Dango's playing as the wing back or the left back, then there's a chance he might be starting that game anyway. So it seems really impossible to call at this point. I'm sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's difficult to really figure out what to do there. But still, I think when you sort of compare my team to a lot of other engaged managers out there, I feel as if I'm relatively comfortably placed with the extra free transfer I have at my disposal, and because I'm not taking hits, I'm more or less okay with the team that I have
Yeah.
this week.
That's the thing for you, because your team is very well set up for this week anyway. You do have more flexibility. If you wanted to bench Dango, you could do it for free and then have someone come in, which is a great spot to be in. I've got a question for you in terms of hits in general and how worthwhile hits are this week. For me to have a full 11, I have Dango. So saying he doesn't start, I'd have to take a hit to get a replacement for him. Is a move like that worth it? Not specifically for Dango, but say you've got 10 right now, or say you've got someone that you don't think is going to start, or someone like Greaves on the bench. Well, he's
Someone
been on
like
my bench, so
Allison,
I'm going to have
someone
to
like
play him.
Allison. A lot of people have Allison. A lot of people have
Yeah,
Allison.
I've got Allison as well. I'm going to have to sell. Is it worth selling him for a hit or selling him for free, etc.?
I think you need to look at each transfer in isolation personally. I'm not a huge fan of taking hits. I never have been. And especially this season, I haven't taken a hit all season. So generally, I tend not to, lean on the side of taking hits. I would still lean towards that way because even with free transfers, so for example, when you look at my team, I am still sort of 50-50 between playing Dango and making a free transfer. But that's because I have a free transfer. Let's say if I didn't have a free transfer, I don't think I'd sell Dango for a hit because I just think that you're throwing away points at a point where uh, not too many alternatives appeal. And there's no guarantee that you make up those lost points this week anyway. And especially with Allison, Allison has Everton at home next week. So you're effectively looking at a clean sheet this week to potentially just break even. So I would probably just ride it out with 10 outfielders this week. And with Dango, if he starts game week 30, I don't think a hit is worth it as well. But if he
No.
doesn't start 30, then it's probably worth it. That's what you have to figure out as well. But it's just that I feel as if we're at a point where free transfers from next week onwards will be worth their weight in gold because that is when the schedule and all will come out
Yeah.
close to 31. We'll be needing those transfers for the bench boost, especially for people who still have their system manager chip left. So I think you need to sort of proceed with caution.
This is the thing again, like the change to the game with the ability to roll up to 5 free transfers. Normally you'd be like, okay, we'll dead end into this week, maybe wildcard 30, or dead end into wildcard 31. So you want to use your transfers up, but now, like, unless the opportunity is really there, it is tough. And it's the same with hits as well, I suppose. Let's talk about
I
Palmer a
just
little
think
bit.
yeah, this is one final point I'd like to add is that, this week I like a lot of the attackers, but especially for defenders, I just don't feel as if um, there's any need to take hits, because when you look at the clean sheet probability for defenders or goalkeepers or any team, the highest clean sheet probability is 35%. For Everton and Arsenal, with the joint best, 35%. That is very low overall in the context of a single game week. So it's very, very unlikely that you take a hit, especially in defense, and that you recover the points this week.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about Palmer. Maybe Chelsea as well in general. You've got Colwell, who's not got the best fixture, but not too much you can do about that, I suppose. But yeah, on Palmer, like obviously it makes sense. He's got a game this week. You say he's got that good game against Tottenham where anything could really happen. We saw last season that game went a bit crazy, so you never know what might happen in that. But he's been poor recently. Chelsea have got a couple of results against the two worst teams in the league, but apart from that, have been poor. What are your thoughts on him? A lot of people will be looking to sell him rather than a Salah and keep their money in Salah and then have him back for that Everton game. You could do it as well. I know you mentioned earlier that the reasons why you're thinking not to, but in terms of like money, you could do that easily and maintain your squad very well. So you happy to give him just a little bit more time? What are your thoughts on Chelsea in general?
Yeah, so for me, my conundrum is basically Palmer versus Salah, and it's two fixtures versus one in the next 2 weeks. It's the fact that I'll have to use another transfer as well, which would be saved, and each transfer, in my opinion, is worth 4 points. And it's the fact that with Palmer, I'll have some spare cash available as well. I think it's a very fickle game, Jack, because the game of variance is actually crazy, because we saw last week that Salah scored twice from penalties. Palmer actually hit a very good penalty, and I thought that he was very unlucky not to score.
Yeah, it was a
Had
great
he scored,
save.
he would. It was actually a really good save. It was a good penalty, and it's come in a week where he needed to really score to regain that sort of form that people talk about, because generally his penalty record is really good. Had he hauled that game, would we be having a very, let's say, uh, a big debate about this? I don't think it would be as vociferous as it is right now, because when you look at Palmer, there were spells early in the season where he was doing really well. Now it's a spell where his underlying data, while it's not that great, had he scored that penalty, it would have been, that those cracks would have been papered over. But now it's sort of come out in the cold. I'm perfectly fine giving him another couple of games at his price and then sort of reevaluating his place in my squad later on. But I just think it's a case of bad variance, and I really hope he comes good against Arsenal this week.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I completely agree with you. He was also ill as well, which is worth mentioning, and he demanded to play. So he's trying to get back into form, and yeah, he obviously didn't train for the couple of days before the game, and still he didn't play terribly. Yeah, a few misplaced passes, missed the
I would
penalty,
just like
but
to mention that, in FPL, things can change very, very quickly. So, for example, let's say 3 weeks ago, João Pedro was looking like a terrible, terrible pick. Now
yeah,
he's gotten 29 points in 3 games, right? Players will go through these spells where, one of them looks great, and then at times they don't look all that great. Colwell is another perfect example. He's more or less done nothing over the course of the season, but last 2 weeks, 20 points. Right. So I think,
yeah,
especially with certain players, like for example, Palmer, we know that over a sustained period of time, he has elite underlying data. It's only a matter of time before he comes good, as opposed to this being a trend. It's just been bad luck, in my opinion.
yeah, completely agree. Okay, we've been chatting for about half an hour or so now. I think we've covered most points, but you have a few other sort of quick fire things that you want to just address that we might have missed in this video so far, Bakar. So what are you
Yeah.
starting off with?
Very Yeah, very, very quickly. There were a few questions that I was sent. Rogers replacement, I think I'd lean towards selling for a Bournemouth mid. We've spoken at length about that. Uh, Whether any City player is worth considering apart from Haaland is another popular question this week. I think Guardiola is maybe one I'd look at, but then again, I think that City will likely concede this week. Uh, but he's a good hold for the next two if you're looking at him from that point of view, and he's at least safe for minutes. there's no one else I can really talk about from City. I guess we will get leaks this week before the deadline because City have the first fixture, but I can't really see Marmoush being a realistic pick unless we hear, unless we get a credible pick, credible leak before the deadline, and even then, there's no sort of guarantee that he starts in 30. So personally, I would stay far away from Marmoush. Um, Apart from that, there's a question about whether or not it's worth bringing and buying Bruno this week, and there's another question about wildcarding. So on Bruno, I'd like to touch upon briefly. I think he's a great hold, and I think I would probably have him on a free hit. I'm not sure whether I'd go out of my way to buy him this week. I think if the comparison is between him and the Bournemouth mids, I would rather prefer the Bournemouth mids because Bruno is playing a bit deeper, and that sort of worries me, even against a team like Leicester. The last question I would like to quickly run through is whether or not it's worth wildcarding this week. So a lot of people, Jack, have plenty of flags in their teams, and they're sort of considering whether or not it's worth taking hits, and they're thinking that maybe a wildcard could be um, sort of a way to get out of it. Now, I personally don't feel as if wildcarding this week is the best option because I mentioned earlier that cup info will emerge, and I just don't really like the idea of sort of predicting how the doubles will fall. And if you're wildcarding this week, you're sort of predicting how the doubles will fall. You're building a team around that. I have seen a couple of teams though, which are well and truly decimated and which do need a wildcard though. So it's not a strategy I would completely rule out. I think if anyone is looking for that strategy, I think the idea behind that is that you go for players who are not blanking this week, while also, let's say, buying 3 or 4 from Palace or Newcastle to cover for 32 for the double later. And also at the same time, making sure that you have enough people who are playing in Game Week 34 as well. So I think that's the rough idea behind it. I think
Okay.
that's all from me. I think I've been going on and on about this since ages. So sorry for taking a lot
Ah,
of
it's
your
been
time.
great. It's been great. Good advice as always. But yeah, there we go. An extended episode because it's a bumper week. We've said it for a while now leading up to this week that this is going to be the big one. And from now on in, really, there are going to be some huge decisions. This is the business end of the season. I hope we get a lot of fun with the chips. We'll see what happens in the FA Cup as well, of course, in future weeks. But for this one, I think that's going to do it. Bakar, thank you very much, as always, for your very helpful tips
Pleasure, Jack. Thank
and
you.
advice.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hope you guys got some good value out of that. Drop any more comments that you might have down below. Let us know your thoughts on the video in general. Good luck this game week, and we will catch you afterwards.